Welcome to the finale of Unreleased 32X. I'm going to cover the rules, then jump right into it. The rules for inclusion are simple. There has to be some proof that the game was in development, be it an article in a magazine, known copy of a prototype, a retail order sheet, an interview with a developer, etc. With that, let's get going. This is Retro Impressions, and we are looking at unreleased games for the 32X. In the early 90s, Domark had become well known for publishing air combat simulators. Beyond being on an upcoming release list in Game Player's magazine, nothing is known about Apache. I assume this was a working title as Digital Integration released a game under the same name for DOS around the same time. Thayer's Quest was an interactive movie from 1984 that was fairly popular when released, but like Dragon's Lair, it aged poorly. With the advent of the CDI, these games saw a resurgence as they finally had a device allowing them to truly come home. Full motion video games in particular were some of the few already existing experiences that could be ported with little effort to take advantage of this new storage medium. While the 32X version would never see the light of day, Thayer's Quest would release for a number of disc-based systems including the CDI and 3DO under the title Kingdom Far Reaches. Here's a question. What game was slated for release on the 32X? Was it Thunderhawk or Thunderhawk 2? According to any source you look at online, it's the latter. In fact, there's even an ad in Sega Vision's issue 24 listing Thunderhawk 2 under games coming soon for the 32X, along with a mention at the end of the Virtual Fighting Training VHS. Here's the kicker though. In the December 1994 issue of CVG, Course PR manager Susie Hamilton is interviewed about upcoming Saturn and 32X releases. She talks about their first 32X releases being ports of Sega CD games, including Soulstar, BC Racers, and Thunderhawk, stating,
"Everybody seemed to love the look of Thunderhawk on the Mega CD, but some said it was a bit samey. We're going to take this into account with the 32X version and make the missions more varied so there will be marked progression."
So there you have it. Thunderhawk for the 32X was nothing more than an enhanced port from the Sega CD. The game would never appear on the 32X, though its sequel would eventually release on the Saturn in 1996. As far as I can tell, Thunderhawk 2 was never planned for release on the 32X. Timmy Time was a run-and-gun action game planned for the Genesis and 32X that took the player on a time-traveling journey, with each stage set in a different time period. It's assumed the game was cancelled due to the industry moving away from 2D games and the cancellation of both the Mega Drive and 32X. Another factor that might have impacted the game being abandoned is its developer Domark was acquired by Eidos in September of 1995. Tomcat Alley Deluxe for the 32X was announced in August of 1994. Nothing else was ever said, but it's assumed this port was a visually enhanced upgrade to the Sega CD release, as was every single other FMV game Sega ported over to their new system. Virtual Hamster is by far the most well-known unreleased game for the 32X. This is due in part to its Virtua title and an early prototype being dumped online some time ago. It was marketed as a puzzle adventure game where you assume control of Chip the hamster and navigate hamster tubes while taking on a variety of enemies who are hell-bent on stopping you from doing what you do. The game started as a 32X exclusive funded by Sega and developed by David A. Palmer Productions before moving to the Saturn, where it was nearly finished before Sega stopped funding its development. In fact, David of David A. Palmer fame has commented on Virtua Hamster, notating that the dumped prototype is far from a fair representation of the game and is an extremely early build. So what happened to the game? According to David, Sega stopped making payments to his company for their work, a lawsuit ensued, and as part of the settlement, all rights to the game's intellectual property and code were signed over to his company. That's really all we know. VR Troopers was a fighting game based on the show of the same name. I don't ever remember seeing VR Troopers on TV, but it was popular enough to receive a Sega exclusive game. If you're unfamiliar with the show as was I, it's a Power Rangers-esque experience made by the same studio. The fighting game was announced for release on the Genesis and Game Gear, but not the 32X. Sega's short-lived flagship console would instead receive a unique vehicle-based shooter. All three games were announced during the summer of 1995, with the 32X exclusive being cancelled along with the system. Continuing the trend of studios buying video game rights to big budget movies, Ocean acquired the rights to what most people thought would be the biggest movie of all time. Unfortunately for Ocean, Waterworld the movie was a financial disaster, going well over budget while underperforming at the box office and with critics. The game was initially planned for just about every active platform you can think of. It released on every active Nintendo console, including the Virtual Boy, with the Super Nintendo version being ported to the Genesis. The Genesis version was finished receiving a review in Sonic the Comic issue 67, then nothing. Even though the game was also in development and rumored to be finished for the 32X, Genesis, and Saturn, none would be released. Most versions, including the PC release, were altogether different games, so it's tough to say what was in store for the 32X. While it still remains a mystery, the complete Genesis game has been dumped online. In 1992, Sega released their revolutionary Model 1 arcade hardware. Beyond one virtual reality game, the full library consists of Virtual Racing, Star Wars Arcade, Virtua Fighting, and Wing War. Wing War has the dubious distinction of being the only standard M1 game not released on a home console or the 32X. The game was an incredible air combat simulator, allowing the player to fly a large variety of planes from different eras. It's a game that would have been a guaranteed system seller if it had released. Wirehead is yet another Sega-produced FMV game that was to be ported to the 32X. As with all other FMV games Sega owned the rights to, this would have received nothing more than an increase in colors displayed and cleaner video. In the years leading up to the 32X, Sega acquired the rights to develop exclusive XMen games and contracted with some of the most talented studios to do so. With the 32X about to debut, Sega again turned to a development team who had done amazing things with both the Genesis and 32X. Xenix was brought on board to develop a new Sega exclusive XMen game designed specifically for the 32X. If Xenix sounds familiar, it's because we briefly covered them in their incredible tech demo in part 2 of this series. Development seemed to be moving right along, with a prototype being showcased near the third quarter of 1995. This demo featured Wolverine in some sort of dojo stage and was met with high praise. The game appeared to be close to complete, as CVG previewed an early build promising a full review in the following issue. Of course, the outcome of this game is clear because the game made this list. When the 32X was cancelled, Sega decided not to continue development. A prototype was eventually dumped online thanks to a generous buyer who picked it up on eBay for nearly $1,000. It's a fairly notable release because a limited printing of this cart was released to the public. It's also notable because it's clearly not the version showcased to the public in 1995. Here, Wolverine is absent, with only Bishop being available to the player. It seems to me this demo was intended to test level layout rather than showcase actual mechanics. The gameplay that's there is extremely unique, as it's very similar to Guardian Heroes, where you're in a 3D space but battling in a 2D plane. It even makes use of the 6-button controller's mode button, something I dedicated an entire series to. While there's no way to know if the end product would have been good, the content showcase had incredible promise of delivering something great. That's the end of Unreleased 32X, but not the end of Unreleased as a series. I'm currently working on a video covering 3DO's Unreleased M2 and the games in development for that system. Special thanks to Erin from Erin Plays Games for lending voice support. Her channels offer a unique look at obscure hardware and software not often discussed. I've left links to both her YouTube and Twitch channels and recommend you check them out. That's it for now. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Feel free to leave a positive or negative comment letting me know your thoughts. If you would like to chat or keep up to date on channel-related news, follow me on Twitter at Jenovi. And until next time, you've been watching Retro Impressions.